take time, and within that time frame, we are going to be faced with a problem that's going to be monumental in that one of these empires is going to fall out of war. Today, what we're going to talk about is what takes place within Russia, as they are going to maybe suffer more than anyone else during the war. Now, we have seen Russia and some of its shortcomings before. They simply can't keep up. They are ill prepared to fight an industrialized war. They are massive and agrarian. They have had a long history during this war of not even being able to supply their own troops. They're going to send men into the trenches and tell them, when someone else dies, then you'll have a rifle. This is a big problem. They are on the verge of collapse. They have general strikes taking place, people refusing to go to what limited industry they have. They have food shortages. People are starving to death in Russia. The huge casualty numbers are starting to mount. Basically, everyone in Russia has a story about a family member or a friend, someone who's dead or horrifically wounded from the war. They can't keep going. The empire is just barely hanging on. They need a bold move, and they need some strong leadership, and they need it right now. Tsar Nicholas II takes it upon himself. He's going to go to the front lines. He's going to lead his troops. Now, monarchs don't do this. This is not what they have to do. But Tsar Nicholas II says, I have a situation where my soldiers are refusing to go to the front line. I need to be an example. He's going to go to the trenches himself to lead the Russian troops. Now, I should probably say this. Hats off for him trying this. But really, it's too little too late. Russia is wobbling more than any other empire. They're just barely holding on. They have sailors refusing to go to their ships. Russia's in a lot of trouble. When Tsar Nicholas II makes this decision to go to the front, he needs to leave someone behind to run the government. He chooses his wife, the Tsarina, to be in charge while he's gone. But the Tsarina does have a weakness. It's not her fault, but she's put in an impossible position. That weakness is she's a German. You now have a German in charge of the Russian government. Now, I should probably say this too about the Tsarina. She's not necessarily a bad choice, because the Tsar and the Tsarina are in kind of actually a weird situation as far as monarchs go, in that Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra, they actually love each other a great deal. Monarchs during this time, marriage was not about being in love for them. It was an alliance, it was arranged, it was done to consolidate power. But the Tsar and Tsarina are very much in love. And there's going to be another problem. The heir to the throne, young Alexei, an 8-year-old boy, and the only male heir, is a hemophiliac. His blood won't clot. Any kind of small cut or bruise, and Alexei could very easily bleed to death. Now, he's 8 years old. He does what 8-year-olds do. He runs throughout the palace. He scrapes his knees. He falls. Every small, tiny, insignificant injury can be his end. On multiple occasions, young Alexei is going to find himself with a tiny cut that just won't clot. There are stories, the Tsar and the Tsarina write, that are just horrific, where there's one instance where he fell just in a small accident. He got a bruise on his leg, and he's just wailing in pain because the blood won't clot. And the Tsar and Tsarina are in his room, and they think probably this is the one. It's going to kill him. And young little Alexei says, "When I die, is the pain going to stop?" These are the things that the Tsar and Tsarina have seen multiple times before, and in this particular incident, they think it's the one, and they have all the best doctors of Russia around, and they tell the Tsar and Tsarina, "There's nothing we can do. Your son's going to die a slow and painful death." But a letter comes to the Tsar and Tsarina, and it's not even signed. It just says, "The boy will survive. I'll arrive tomorrow." Now, this weird kind of mystic letter is just really the first of what we're going to see as a string of very odd events. The next day, the Tsar and Tsarina are exhausted as they've taken shifts being with young Alexei, thinking he's going to die, when a man shows up at the palace that, at best, is very odd. He is from the backwoods of Russia. He is dirty and smelly and has a real serious alcohol problem. This is Grigory Rasputin. He shows up at the palace and he says, "You got my letter. Take me to the boy." They take him to Alexei. He looks at the boy and he says, "He's going to survive. I'll be back." He leaves the room, and all but immediately, Alexei stops crying. The wound starts to heal. Now here's Rasputin in the palace. As the Tsar and Tsarina approach him, they said, "How did you know Alexei would survive?" And Rasputin just says, "I foresee it. I see lots of things." The Tsar leaves the palace to go to the front. It's now the Tsarina and Rasputin together. And again, Alexei falls. Same situation happens. Rasputin goes up to the boy and just puts his hand over him and says, "He'll survive. In fact, he'll be stronger." Leaves the room. Alexei stops crying. Now the doctors of Russia are looking at the Tsarina saying, "We have no explanation. We have no way to tell what's going on here." This gives Rasputin a lot of weird power over the Tsarina, because people in Russia start saying, "You're giving this monk, this mystic, all this influence. You never leave his side." And the Tsarina just tells people, and this is a quote from her, she says, "I know it sounds crazy, but I've watched him heal my son. What do you want me to do?" She's not wrong. She's seen it before, but now you have this guy who is really very much a lunatic at the right hand of the Tsarina who's running Russia. There are plenty of people who look at him and say, "We got to get rid of him. We need to solve the problem." How do you solve the problem? You kill him. Now, it was well known that Rasputin, how do I say this kindly? He could never turn down a party. He loved parties. He loved excessive partying all the time. It was well known that Rasputin would basically eat himself into vomiting and then start drinking. Hard. Really, really hard. So there are 5 men, these very high-ranking members in the Russian government, say, we got to get rid of him. This should be very easy. They invite him to a party and tell him, oh, this is going to be great. This will be the party of the year. He shows up, and they say, Rasputin, we know how much you love these cupcakes. Here, enjoy. Rasputin starts eating these cupcakes. Has about 2 dozen of them. All the cupcakes are poisoned. And he says, are there any more cupcakes? These 5 Russian gentlemen, these aristocrats, are kind of looking at each other going, you know what? Let's move on. Rasputin, would you like a drink? Said, sure, I would love to start drinking. They pour him this giant glass of wine. He takes it and just downs the whole thing and says, fill it again. Downs the whole thing. Again. And here are these 5 Russian aristocrats looking at each other going, didn't you poison the wine? What's wrong with that? One of them finally says, I'm sick of this. I'm going to do it. They take him down to the basement. This aristocrat pulls out a gun and shoots him. Fine. Job's done. We solved the problem. 5 aristocrats go back upstairs and they say, all right, now we got to get rid of the body. How do we get rid of the body? Come up with a plan. They say, we're going to wrap him up in a blanket. We're going to throw him off a bridge. And it should figure itself out. They go back down to the basement. The body's not there. Gone.
Just stole the body.
Out of the closet jumps Rasputin and starts beating these aristocrats with an inch of his life. Now he's probably been poisoned. He's been shot. And it's 5 against 1. They get him off of one of the aristocrats, they stab him a few times and shoot him again. They go, finally, he's dead. Maybe.
Died.
They wrap him up in a blanket. They go to the bridge. Now keep in mind, this is Russia, so the water's fantastically cold, if not frozen. They throw him off the bridge, and the next day, they do find his body. But there's water in his lungs. He was probably alive when they threw him off the bridge. Now he is eventually dead, but now the Tsarina's alone. She's running Russia as the revolution is going to begin. When she's in charge, more and more people in Russia are saying, we're going to end the war. It has to stop. We're either doing this with you or we're doing this without you. To make matters even worse, the Germans are looking at what's going on in Russia and they see an opportunity. Russia's wobbling. They just need to push it over. They happen to have this ace up their sleeve. A man who was exiled from Russia years before, who had been living in Switzerland, that was very much a thorn in the side of the Tsar and Tsarina. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin has been talking about some ideas that are very, very dangerous. These ideas that could topple the Tsar. The Germans take their ace up their sleeve and put him on a train. Now, this guy is an intellectual contagion. If he starts spouting off his ideas, it's like a disease. It spreads. The Germans put him on a train with multiple guards and tell him very specifically, he is not getting off the train until he gets to Russia. If we let him out in Germany, he could topple our empire. He gets to Russia and becomes the face of the revolution.